Today we are moving on with our boundaries, and I found it to be a very interesting Sunday for this to fall on. We're moving out of kind of the first section of the book. We're studying, for those of you who are new, we are going through the book Boundaries by Cloud and Townsend. And this book's been around for a long time, about 15 years probably, and is an amazing book. And so that is the book that we're studying. And so we're kind of moving out of the first section, and now we're moving into boundaries and something. And so today is boundaries and family. And in the weeks to come, we're going to be looking at boundaries in your friends, boundaries in your spouse, boundaries in your children, your work, with yourselves, and with God. So those are coming. And I thought I would be able to do family in one Sunday, but as I was going through it, I thought this is going to be at least it's going to be 2 weeks. It's going to be a 2-week thing for this one. So today we're going to be talking about boundaries in your family, and I found it very interesting because here we are at Christmas. And what do we do at Christmas? We're around our families. And we're usually around our families who know how to, either they know how to how to find those trigger points in us, that they're aware that they're doing it, or they may not be aware that they're doing it. But if we're going to be triggered in any of our behavior, it's going to be when we're with our families. So here is something that I'm going to read from Dear Abby. I found this a few weeks ago, and I thought this fits perfectly with boundaries. And so I'm going to start with this. Dear Abby, I recently found out that after 13 years of marriage, my son and daughter-in-law are expecting a child, my first grandchild. I was overjoyed at the news. They live about 1,000 miles away from me. I mentioned to my son that I have been looking at flights and want to come out a week before her due date, so I will be there for the big moment, and then I'll stay for 3 or 4 weeks to help with the baby. I was shocked when he told me they don't want me to visit until at least 3 weeks after the birth and stay for 1 week max. He said my daughter-in-law will need time to heal, and they both need time to adjust to being parents before they have guests. I am not a guest. I am the grandmother. I was also told not to expect to take care of the baby because it is their job. It hurts so bad not to be wanted to share in the joy of the new baby. I have always dreamed of watching my grandchild take his or her first breath and seeing the look on my son's face when he holds his child for the first time. Is there anything I can do to change their minds and allow me to be there for my son at this important moment? Do you agree that they are being unreasonable and cruel? Family First in Florida. Dear Family First, I'm sure you are a loving mother, but I don't agree. And I doubt you can change their minds. If it is going to take 3 weeks for your daughter-in-law to heal, it appears the baby's birth will be by C-section and she will need time to regain her strength. The new parents will also need time to adjust to the baby's sleep and feeding schedules. They will be sleep deprived and she will be nursing every few hours and not up for company. While you may have always dreamed of being present at your grandchild's birth, the reality is your son and daughter-in-law would prefer this intimate moment be shared by them alone. I'm sorry you were hurt, truly. Let them know you are willing to help them in any way you can on their terms and take your cues from them. Do not take any of this personally. So that right there was boundaries and families, right there. Can you see the conflicts that can come up? And many more. That's just one that I happened to run across. So we're going to start looking at boundaries and families. And so here is a little story out of boundaries that's going to get us kind of jumping off. Susie had a problem that I had seen countless times before. This 30-year-old woman would return from a visit to her parents' home and suffer a deep depression. When she described her problem to me, I asked her if she noticed that every time she went home to visit, she came back extremely depressed. Why, that's ridiculous, she said. I don't live there anymore. How could the trip affect me this way? When I asked her to describe the trip, Susie told of social gatherings with friends and family around the dinner table. These were fun, she said, especially when it was only family. What do you mean only family, I asked. Well, the other times my parents would invite some of my friends over, and I didn't like those dinners as well. Why was that? Susie thought for a minute and then replied, I guess I start to feel guilty. She began to recount the subtle remarks her parents would make comparing her friends' lives to hers. They would talk of how wonderful it is for grandparents to have a hands-on role in raising the children. They would talk of the community activities her friends were doing and how wonderful she would be at those activities if she only lived there. The list went on and on. Susie soon discovered that when she returned home, she felt as if she were bad for living where she lived. She had a nagging sense that she really should do what her parents wanted her to do. Susie had a common problem. She had made choices on the outside. She had moved away from the family she grew up in to pursue a career on her own. She had been paying her own bills. She had even gotten married and had a child. But on the inside, things were different. She did not have emotional permission to be a separate person, make free choices about her life, and not feel guilty when she did not do what her parents wanted. So based on the premise that we have an outside and an inside, where was Susie's problem? On the inside. Can you guys relate to that? We make choices on the outside of us, but inside it might be a different story. And here we are getting ready to go and be around family this week. And what's going to happen to us? We're going to be put back in that family situation. What happens to us? Chronologically, we might be however old. But what tends to happen when we get back around our families?
We fall back into that old mindset.
We fall back into the old mindset.
And the expectations.
Expectations. Right. And it's subtle. And some of them are unspoken. But you know. So there's this whole dynamic that's going on inside of us about our families and triggered. We get back around those families and triggers are just set off, right? Okay. So why is this conflict going on in her? What's going on in her head and her heart? Is she sure she did the right thing? Is there some expectation of, in order to have my parents' approval, I have to please them? I have my parents are not approving of me. How important is that? How important is it? I mean, the Bible talks about the Father's blessing. That's a big deal. We see it with Jacob and Esau. I mean, Jacob, the deceiver, stole his brother's blessing. So we see that. So the Father's blessing is very important. And then Jacob blessed each of his sons. And so there's something very important about the Father's blessing, or the parents' blessing. What are the parents doing, whether they realize it or not?
Degrading. They're being conditional.
They're being conditional. Manipulating. They are manipulating. They may or may not realize it. I mean, consciously. They may kind of know they're doing it, but they may not have formed it in terms of, I am being manipulative right now. But that's what they're doing. And like the mother in the Dear Abby, I'm sure. Manipulation. I mean, she's going to tell them how maybe in subtle terms, and how many times have we been punished? Like you don't quite do what someone in your family wants you to do, and you know that there's a punishment if you don't do it. Spoken or unspoken, but through actions. So that would be that type of anger. Passive aggressive. It's passive aggressive anger going on right there. Okay, so here's a commentary from Boundaries. Boundaries define someone's property. So just like a fence around your physical property, around your yard. Susie and others like her do not really own themselves. People who own their lives do not feel guilty when they make choices about where they are going. They take other people into consideration, but when they make healthy choices for their lives, they do it for the wishes of others. They do it not because the other person has manipulated them, but because that's what they have chosen to do based from a healthy perspective. Does that make sense? It's unhealthy when we do it out of manipulation. It's healthy when we do it when we've considered everything, but we may or may not do what the other person wants us to do. So whose opinion should we be seeking out? whenever we are deciding what we're going to do, what decisions we are going to make. God's. It's God's choice. It's God's decision. So when we are looking at big decisions, God's the one that we've got to see, because you know what? God's the one who knows what He wants to do in our lives, and it may be in opposition to what our earthly parents want. But God's going to be the one we've got to follow. So it can be challenging. I'm going to say that. It can be very challenging. So we're going to look at some signs of a lack of boundaries, and we may or may not get through all these today. I'm going to try to get through all the signs. See if I can get mine. There we go. Signs of a lack of boundaries. Okay, number 1, catching the virus. That's number 1 on your fill-in sheet. Today, the stories that I'm going to be talking about today, it might say him or her. Just know that if it says one, it applies to both. Because I didn't want to go through each of these stories and go him and her. You know, that gets old really fast. So just keep in mind that it is talking about both. Did I skip something? Let me check something real quick. Nope, that's right. This is a common scenario. One spouse doesn't have good emotional boundaries with the family he grew up in, the family of origin. So the family that we grew up in is called our family of origin. When contact is made with the family by phone or in person, he becomes depressed, argumentative, self-critical, perfectionistic, angry, combative, or withdrawn. So here this person has had contact with his family and one of these things happens, or more of these things, more than one of these things happens. It's as though he catches something from his family of origin and then passes it on to his immediate family. The family of origin has the power to affect his new family in a trickle-down effect. Oh, we have a bit, you might need to sit on the floor to keep. Yeah. And for being in people's way. But anyway, so one of the spouses has contact with family of origin, and then it's like this criticism happens, anger happens, something's been triggered, and this person has this response. Then it's passed on to the family. Has anybody seen that? It's like catching a virus. So here is our fill in the blank. Hopefully you can read that. One sure sign of boundary problems is when your relationship with one person has the power to affect your relationships with others. You are giving one person way too much power in your life when that happens. It is as if that person owns part of you. That person owns part of you. You have contact with them, and you've got these other responses because something's been triggered. And so I've seen it happen. Number 2, second fiddle. So here's a story. It says, you wouldn't believe how she is with him, Dan said. She totally focuses on his every wish. When he criticizes her, she tries harder, and she practically ignores me. I'm tired of being the second man in her life. Dan wasn't talking about Jane's lover, he was talking about her father. Dan was tired of feeling like Jane cared more about her father's wishes than hers. This is a common sign of a lack of boundaries with the family of origin. The spouse feels like he gets the leftovers. He feels as if the mate's real allegiance is to her parents. This spouse hasn't completed the leaving before cleaving process. She has a boundary problem. So the spouse, the whole leaving before cleaving, She hasn't gone through that process. For the marriage to work, the spouse needs to loosen her ties with her family of origin and forge new ones with the new family she is creating through marriage. So when we are married, is it wrong to have a relationship with our families? No, that's not what I'm saying. That is not what it's. It has to do with what power does that family of origin have over you. Because clear boundaries have to be set. And when you forge into that new family, it's really good for that new family to maybe not live in close proximity to the parents, because sometimes it can be the children wanting to maintain contact, and sometimes it's the parents wanting to maintain contact because the parents are getting some of their emotional support from that, or emotional well-being from that child. And so there's got to be, for it to be in the godly image, there's got to be a new family forged. And so that's just like in that Dear Abby. They're forging a new family. And mom's wanting to try to step in. We have, in our family, we have a niece who is pregnant, and she was talking about it at Thanksgiving, that her mother was making assumptions about being in certain parts of this, and she said, I had to tell her, no, you're not going to be there for the ultrasound whenever we find out the sex. You're going to find out at Christmas whenever we announce it. So, so it can be challenging. Okay. Number 3, may I have my allowance, please? Terry and Sherry were an attractive couple. They owned a big house and went on lavish vacations. Their children took piano lessons and ballet, and they had their own skis, rollerblades, ice skates, and windsurfers. Terry and Sherry had all the trappings of success. But there was one problem. This lifestyle was not supported by Terry's paycheck. They received help from Terry's family. His family had always wanted the best for him, and they had always helped him get it. They had contributed to the house, the vacations, and the children's hobbies. While this allowed Terry and Sherry to have things they could not otherwise have, it cost them dearly as well. Were Terry and Sherry physically adults? Yes. Physically speaking, they were adults. But were they adults financially? No. They were not adults financially, and so that was an issue. The parents' desire for Terry and Sherry to have everything the parents had was creating codependency. So they had created a codependent relationship, and sometimes the parents want that. They have a need in their own life that they still need to be connected to that child, and they created themselves. The other side of the coin is when the children are perpetually irresponsible, in constant financial trouble, dealing with drug or alcohol abuse, out of control spending, or the I haven't found my niche syndrome. So we'll talk about that here in a little bit. An adult child who does not stand on his own financially is still a child. To be an adult, you must live within your means and pay for your own failures. So we may, based on that, know where maybe we are, or our children are, or other people that we know are. Number 4, Mom, where are my socks? Here's the scenario. This adult child often hangs out at Mom and Dad's house, vacations with them, drops off laundry, and eats many meals there. He is Mom or Dad's closest confidant, sharing everything with them. At 30-something, he hasn't found his career niche, and he has no savings, no retirement plan, and no health insurance. On the surface, these things do not appear to be serious problems, but often Mom and Dad are symbolically keeping their adult child from emotionally leaving home. Often their finances are a problem. They have large and multiple credit card balances and usually are behind on their taxes. Although they are earning their own way daily, they never think about the future. This is essentially an adolescent financial life. Adolescents make enough money to buy a surfboard, stereo, or dress, but do not think past the immediate present to the future. 3 is a crowd. Dysfunctional families are known for a certain type of boundary problem called triangulation. So see if you recognize this. This is how it goes. Andy is angry at Betty. Andy does not tell Betty. Andy goes to Kathy and gripes about Betty. Kathy enjoys Andy's confidence and listens whenever Andy wants to play the triangle game. By this time, Betty, feeling lonely, calls Kathy and in passing mentions the conflict with Andy. Kathy becomes the confidant of Betty as well as Andy. Andy and Betty have not resolved their conflict, and Kathy has 2 new friends. That's triangulation. So there are a lot of things going on here. There's a failure to resolve a conflict between 2 people. Pulling a third person in to take sides. Andy and Betty are relying on Kathy for comfort. By playing the triangulation game, Andy is not owning his anger. Andy may appear to be cordial to Betty, but is really angry. That would be passive aggressiveness. Betty deserves to hear about the anger directly. Gossip becomes an issue, etc., etc. And there's a spiral that goes on. So here are some scriptures that address this issue. Oh, did I not put scriptures in? I forgot to put scriptures in. Sorry. Okay, Proverbs 28:23. You can write that down. In the end, people appreciate frankness more than flattery. Matthew 5:23 through 24. So what if you are offering your gift at the altar and remember that someone has something against you? Leave your gift there and go make peace with that person. Then come and offer your gift. And Matthew 18:15. If a brother sins against you, go to them privately and confront him with his fault. If he listens and confesses it, you have won back a brother. So in those scriptures, when you look at those, there's no triangulation going on. It's face value. This is what it is. Number 6, who's the child here anyhow? 2 Corinthians 12:14 says, children should not have to save up for their parents, but parents for their child. Parents for their children. So here's commentary. It says, some people are born to take care of their parents. They did not sign up for this duty. They inherited it. Today we call these people codependent. Early in life they learned they were responsible for their parents, who were stuck, and the parents were stuck in childish patterns of irresponsibility. When they became adults, they had a difficult time setting boundaries between themselves and their irresponsible parents. Every time they tried to have separate lives, they felt selfish. I had I was talking to my sister-in-law the other day, and this is a situation she has with her mother. My sister-in-law was put in the position at a very young age of being the parent. And I told my sister-in-law the other day, I said, I am so sorry that you were put in that position at that young age. And she continues, the mother is now living with them, with my brother and my sister-in-law, and continues to, it's a very sad situation because the mother consistently keeps my sister-in-law in the position of being the parent. So when you are looking at that kind of relationship, you have to look, does the parent really need help? In my sister-in-law's case, yes. The mother has lost a leg, she's diabetic. Or is the parent being irresponsible, demanding, and acting like a martyr? The parent can act like a martyr. And when they are really in need, do you have the resources to give? There are lots of people who are in the middle of elderly parents on one side and raising their own children on the other. A family needs to decide what they want to give and what they do not want to give, so they will continue to love and appreciate the parent and not grow resentful. That can be an issue. Resentment can come up, and it can get very conflicting. Number 7, but I'm your brother or sister. Siblings. Some of you may have this situation going on. Many times, an irresponsible adult child depends on a responsible adult sibling to avoid growing up and leaving the family. We are not talking about a sibling with mental or physical impairment here. We are talking about someone who's quite capable, but they're depending on another sibling. What are the tough issues in that kind of situation? You have a sibling who depends on you. What issues are going on? Or what issues do you feel?
Finances.
Do what?
Finances.
Finances. What? Say that the sibling comes to you and they need help. This is the 100th time. What are you feeling?
Guilt if you don't.
Guilt if you don't.
Anger.
Anger.
Used.
Lots of stuff on it. What are you going to do?
Say no.
And how are you going to feel if you say no?
Guilty.
Guilty. So have you won? You know, I mean,
It's the first step in learning.
it's the first step in winning if you say no. But it's predicament. And so,
Sometimes I find it easier to say no to my kids than I do my siblings.
Yes, ma'am.
I think the thing we have to remember when we do things like that is that we are enabling them to continue in whatever is causing this situation.
Right.
And it's not good to be an enabler.
It's not good to be an enabler, and you have to come to terms with the fact, and you have to, what's going on inside of me and why? What is this triggering in me? It's triggering guilt, but why? So you really have to do some self-evaluation. And Chris, do you want any comments on any of this?
A lot of times, our own unresolved things
Right.
are stirred up, and sometimes we don't do things logically. We do them emotionally.
Right. We do things out of our emotions and not the logic of it. Have you guys ever heard of, let me do it this way. Your child, because this is a real scenario I know about. Your child, you have an older sibling. The older sibling got into a lot of trouble. Left home right at 18. Didn't hear from them for a while. Lots of turmoil between the parents and the older sibling. And as a child, you're watching this, and you make this, you say, I will never hurt that way again. Do you know what that is that you've just done?
Inner vow.
It's an inner vow. I will never hurt this way, or I will never let them hurt this way again. You made that statement in your head as a child. Here you are now, all of you are adults, and the older sibling is still same scenario. Can you help me with this bill? Can you help me with this? I need help with this. And here this person made this inner vow back there as a child. What do you think is going on? They've got this inner vow that they've made. I will never let them hurt that way again. And so now this person who made the inner vow is in this struggle going on because they're enabling, but they've got this inner vow that they made back there that is part of the dynamic. I'm not going to hurt that way again. I don't want them to hurt that way again. So I'm going to help. But then there's resentment. And they know that they're enabling. So what do you do with that? What do you do with that kind of scenario? And then we find ourselves in that. There's got to be some forgiveness going on. Forgiving the older sibling. And is it okay to let someone fail? Is it hard to watch that?
No more.
But sometimes we have to let someone fail. I mean, as Christians, does that go against our grain? Because what are we taught? I mean, if we've been in the church, I mean, it doesn't matter how long you've been in the church, especially if you've been in the church since you were a little bitty. What are we taught? You help those in need. You help those in need. I mean, how many times have we heard that? It's like punched in our head. And so that's one of the biggest challenges of being a Christian and in the whole enabling thing. Those who deal with benevolence see that all the time. Because they know, I know like in this church, there are people, they know that this person goes from church to church to church to church seeking help. And if you don't talk to those other churches, but sometimes they can start to recognize that. Because about once a year or twice a year, this person is back. And so they're being enabled. So, why do we do that? Number one, it's a continuation of an old boundary problem, just like we were talking about the situation that I know of with this adult person, these two adult people, these two adult siblings. This one made an inner vow when she was just a child, saying, I will never let my sibling hurt that way again. Or I don't want to hurt that way. So what we're doing, it's a continuation of the pattern learned way back there, that we're going to go ahead and help. Because what does that do? We help, we're angry, we're resentful, but it makes our guilt go down. So we have this struggle going on. Because our guilt feels better, but then we're angry. You see the conflict going on in this situation? So I'm just going to read what Boundaries has to say. The patterns you learn at home growing up are continued into adulthood with the same players. Lack of consequences for irresponsible behavior. Lack of confrontation. As Christians, generally speaking, do we like to confront people? We're supposed to be nice and we're supposed to be... Did Jesus confront people? Yes. He did. And I hate to confront people. I have to work myself up to it. I have to talk myself into it. Curtis is much better than I am. I'm not good. And it goes back to my childhood issues. It really does. I mean, I'll tell you, it goes back to those. And God's done a lot of healing in my life. So lack of confrontation, lack of limits. Taking responsibilities for others instead of yourself. Giving out of compulsion, resentment, envy, passivity, and secrecy. You've got all of those players going on, and sometimes it's hard to differentiate one from the other because they're all playing together. These patterns are not new. They have just never been confronted and repented of. These patterns run deep. Your family members are the ones you learn to organize your life around, so they are able to send you back into old patterns by their very presence. You get back in your family, and what happens? We talked about it earlier. You're automatically that 8-year-old child or that 12-year-old child or whatever again. You begin to act automatically out of memory instead of growth. You can have, grown, you can feel like you have grown a lot, even spiritually and emotionally and everything, and then God's going, okay, let's do a lab here. Let's put you back in with your family, and let's see what happens. And so you get back in there and you're like, what happened to all the growth that I had? What happened? I've learned a lot and I've grown a lot with my other friends and with, where I work or whatever, or with my immediate family. And I get back in with my family of origin, what happened? What happened to everything I learned? It goes out the window. And God's going, okay, let's see what progress has been made. Let me put you back in a lab situation. Now we'll pull you back out. We'll get you back out of that. And we'll keep learning. We'll keep learning. And then gradually when you get back with that family of origin, you start to see changes. To change, you must identify the sins of the family and turn from them. You must confess them as sins, repent of them, and change the way you handle them. The first step is establishing boundaries is becoming aware of old family patterns that you are still continuing in the present. So if you don't recognize them, this is one of those things you can ask the Holy Spirit to help you recognize, and He will help you do that. I can vouch for that. Look at the struggles you are having with boundaries in your family of origin, identify which laws are being broken, and then pinpoint the resulting negative fruit in your life so you can see what's going on in my life that is negative, that is not healthy. And the Holy Spirit will, if you ask Him to help you with those, He will. The second one on here I find very interesting. It's adoption. So why do we do that? Number one was continuation of old boundary problems, and second is adoption. Here's from boundaries. Boundaries are an essential aspect of growing up. One step in growing up is coming out from under parental authority and putting yourself under God's authority. Some of you may have never really even thought about that concept, that I was under my parents' authority when I was growing up, but as an adult, I have to move out from my parents' authority and move in under God's authority. The Bible says that children are under the authority of their parents until they become adults. Reference to that is Galatians 4, 1 through 7. In a real sense, their parents are responsible for them. But when adulthood and the age of accountability comes, that person comes out from under guardians and managers and becomes responsible for him or herself. Christians move into another parental relationship with God as Father. God does not leave us orphans, but takes us into His family. Some of you here know Elizabeth Duncan. Amazing lady. Here is something that she has said over the last few years, and as I was reading this, I thought this is exactly what she's talking about. She says, too many Christians see themselves in relationship to God as slaves or orphans. They do not see themselves as they truly are, children of God, joint heirs with Jesus Christ. So what does it mean that we would feel in our relationship with God, that we would feel like a slave? What would that mean?
You're not worthy of Him.
Not worthy of, that you have to do something for Him to gain His approval or His acceptance. That you have to, well, if I do this, then God will love me more. If I witness to 5 people, then God will love me more. If I am nice to my kids, then if I don't yell at my kids, then God will love me more. If I whatever, you see where I'm going with that? God will love me. That's a slave mentality. I will be okay if I do such and such. A slave, that's working for a master. The master expects me to do this stuff, and if I do it, then I'll be in good standing with the master. So that's a slave mentality. What is the orphan? How does an orphan see themselves? Alone. Separated. They don't belong to the family. They have nothing. Maybe even similar to a victim mentality. So, and Elizabeth, I've heard her say this so many times, Christians don't see themselves for who they really are. They either see themselves as a slave or they see themselves as an orphan. How does a child of God see themselves?
We should see ourselves as loved.
Loved, accepted. Is it acceptance based on conditions, or is it just acceptance? I mean, I may blow it, but does God still love me?
Yes, unconditional.
If we truly are living with an adopted mentality, we will grasp no matter what I do, God will love me, because with our earthly parents, I may just screw something up. I may, as I've said before, I may be a goober. So say I'm a goober. I have done something, I'm a goober. Am I still the child of my earthly parents?
Yes.
Why? Why am I still their child? Because they birthed me. They cannot unbirth me. They birthed me. I belong to them, no matter what I do. Same with God, even bigger. He birthed us. He has given us life, and we belong to Him no matter what we do. If we have accepted Jesus Christ as our personal Savior, we are then in relationship with God. Can we do anything to undo that? Nothing. We may be a goober. We may do something that causes us to be a goober. But that does not undo our relationship with God. If it did, we would be a creek. I mean, even God says that. I mean, Jesus can't die again. Jesus has done everything He could do. Not everything. I don't even want to word it that way, because that gives you that leaves the feeling of He did everything He could do. It's kind of like a doctor telling you we've done everything we can do, and that's not. He did everything it took.
He died.
He did everything that was required to give us eternal life. Nothing else is needed. And we keep trying to add stuff to it, and there's nothing needed. So out of those three options, that a slave or an orphan or an adopted child of God, how do you really see yourself? And not even how do you see yourself, how do you act? Because you might say, oh, I see myself as an adopted child of God. Do your behaviors show that? Our behaviors are going to tell what we really believe. Because what we really believe, we may say something all day long, but what we really believe is going to be acted out. We will act out what we believe. Cannot help it. You cannot help but act out what you believe. So if you're acting out being a slave or an orphan, then your thought processes are what's going to have to change. It's called the renewing of the mind. So the thought processes have to change. But here's what Matthew 23:9 says, and don't call anyone on earth Father. You have one Father, and He is in heaven. God, Jesus talks about, the Bible talks to the concept that we are adopted. We're talked about being children of God. I mean, there's several scripture references to that if you need more. So here's a question. Have we left our earthly families spiritually? Or are we still a part of our earthly family spiritually? One of the things, Curtis and I have 3 children. One of them's 19, one of them's 15, and one of them's 7. Just like in the Bible, our children are under our roof right now, but at some point, God has to become our God, has to become their God. As an adult, they have to make some decisions. Just like Isaac, when you had Abraham. Abraham, God became his God. Was God Isaac's God right at first? Or did at some point there had to come a time when Abraham's God became Isaac's God, and Isaac's God wasn't just Dad's God. He's my God. Same, you really see it with Jacob. When did God become God to Jacob?
He wrestled with him.
He wrestled with him. On his way back to see Esau, the brother that he had. I mean, it's really funny because here he is, he's going to see Esau. What does he do? He splits his family up. He sends the wife he doesn't like as well first. Sends the wife he doesn't like as well first. So if Esau's going to kill anybody, he'll kill the wife that Jacob doesn't love as much. And then he sends the second wife that he loves, and then Jacob's in the back. And he sent all these gifts in front. Maybe if I gift him enough, the meeting will be okay. But he wrestled with God all night. God became his God that night because he wrestled with him. We each have to wrestle with God so that God becomes our God. And that's what our children are going to have to do. And that's what I pray about. They're going to have to wrestle with God. I had to wrestle with God. Are you my parents' God, or are you my God? And so at some point, have we left our family spiritually? Are we our own? Are we under God? Have we left? There's like a spiritual covering, and we can either be under our parents, but at some point God's going, you got to be kicked out of the nest, and you're going to have to make a decision. Whose covering are you going to be under? You're going to be under your own covering at that point, or are you going to be under mine? Have we left home physically? Are we still one of those people that, I'm not talking about you, Kathy. Or you, Annie. You guys are standing on your own financially. That's a different deal. You know what I'm talking about. Mentally, we can we can still be mentally attached. We can still be emotionally attached. We can still be financially attached. Have we grown up? Can being part of God's family cause conflict with our earthly family? Yes. Here is what Jesus says in Matthew 10, 35 through 37. I have come to make this happen. A son will turn against his father, a daughter will turn against her mother, a daughter-in-law will turn against her mother-in-law. Even members of your own family will be your enemies. Those who love their father or mother more than they love me are not worthy of me. And those who love their son or daughter more than they love me are not worthy of me. Those are Jesus' own words. He's saying you're going to have to leave that home, and you're going to have to come under my authority. It's called growing up. And I had mentioned to you that there's a book that has one of the best descriptions of being an adult that I have ever read, because I don't know that I've ever read any other. This is the book, Changes That Heal, and it's also by Henry Cloud, who wrote Boundaries. So if you want to know what does it mean to be an adult, the back part of that book has one of the best explanations I've ever seen. So here's a question. Biblically speaking, are our closest ties supposed to be with our earthly family or with God's family? God's family. Our closest ties are supposed to be with God's family. Here's what Jesus says in Matthew 12, 46 through 50. While Jesus was talking to the people, his mother and brothers stood outside. They wanted to talk to him. Someone told him, your mother and brothers are waiting for you outside. They want to talk to you. It repeats itself. Jesus answered, who is my mother? Who are my brothers? Then he pointed to his followers and said, see, these people are my mother and my brothers. Yes, anyone who does what my Father in heaven wants is my true brother and sister and mother. So those are Jesus' words. So here's commentaries and boundaries. In this family, which is to be our strongest tie, things are done a certain way. This is talking about our Christian family. We are to tell the truth, set limits, take and require responsibility, confront each other, forgive each other, and so on. Strong standards and values make this family run. And God will not allow it any other way in his family. This in no way means that we are to cut other ties. We are to have friends outside of God's family and strong ties with our family of origin. However, we need to ask two questions. Do these ties keep us from doing the right thing in any situation? And have we really become an adult in relation to our family of origin? So those are the questions I leave you with. Next week, we are going to talk about the resolution of boundary problems within our family. So today we kind of looked at the problems, and you might recognize those more this week as you're around your family. And so actually it's not next week, it's 2 weeks. Next week we don't have Sunday school because it's just the Sunday between Christmas and New Year's. But the week after that, we're going to start looking at the resolution. How do we... And by then you will have time to have seen some of these in your family, perhaps. You might not have recognized them, or you may get around your family. You've known that, I get around my family and I wig out. And so by then you will have that lab experience with your family. And so we can come back and we can talk about the resolutions to those. All right, let me pray real quick and we'll get going. Father,